Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. My name is Nathan Simmons. We've got a lot to get to this week, so let's get started. First, oft-injured pitcher Steven Strasburg to forego Tommy John surgery by getting a cybernetic arm. I didn't even know he was injured. Next, Kobe Bryant is going to donate his entire body to science in order to prove that he is the most generous NBA player of all time. Guess he's making an assist for once. Next up, Tony Romo to start bagging groceries until he can get another starting QB job. If anyone knows anything about sacks, it's Tony Romo. And finally, the terrible bronze bust of Cristiano Ronaldo that debuted this week was voted the second most attractive man in all of Portugal. So, when does he get his Nike deal? Find out on the Nathan Report right now. To the April Fool's edition of Two Nates on Sports. My name is Nathan Simmons. Nathan Kwan's not with us this week, and that's not a joke. But instead, we have Evan Tenenbaum, our always trusty special guest, filling in for him. Let's get started with some March Madness. Evan Tenenbaum, do you have anything that you want to talk about with that?
All right, yeah, we got a pretty hectic Elite Eight going into the Final Four here. Some notable games that happened over the last weekend. Gonzaga beat the surprise team Xavier 83-59 to get to their first Final Four in school history. Oregon upset the number one Kansas by 14 points to get to the first Final Four of theirs since 1939. And then South Carolina beat number 4 Florida by 7 points to get to their first Final Four. And then the game of the weekend, North Carolina scraped by Kentucky 75-73 to get to the Final Four for the second time in 2 years. And they'll see if they can get to the championship game. So what in the Elite Eight stood out to you, Nathan?
Well, definitely that North Carolina-Kentucky game. I had Kentucky going all the way and winning it all in the finals, but what a game. My gosh, that game was so back and forth. I mean, granted, it looked like Kentucky was going to finally pull it out right there at the end, especially with that trailing 3 at the with like 10 seconds left in the game. And then, of course, some bench player off North Carolina is able to score at the very last second with maybe like tenths of a second left and sealed it for the Tar Heels. And now they're going back to their Final Four, the second for back-to-back years. Maybe they can finally finish the job this year and hopefully not have another buzzer beater right at the end, just like with last year's finals. But I mean, good job on UNC. And at the end of the day, you got to feel for those Kentucky players. And even though I personally felt that Kentucky was playing the much better game, that they were much more cohesive as a unit versus North Carolina, which seemed to rely very heavily on hero ball, especially from Justin Jackson, who's been incredible this year as a junior. But another game that really stood out was obviously that Oregon and Kansas game. I mean, neither me nor Quan had Oregon upsetting Kansas. We thought this would be an easy win for the Jayhawks, but we were proven wrong. And I mean, not to say we should have seen it coming, but like Kansas has had quite a few times where they would make it to the Elite Eight and then just completely choke what would seem to be an easy trip to the Final Four. But I mean, kudos to Oregon on making it that far. And it wasn't, while it was for all intents and purposes a pretty big upset, I mean, they had a great season already going into it. So, and they were able to squeak out a win against a very strong and hot Michigan team. So, I mean, kudos to them. We'll see if they can make it to the finals and see if they can get by the Tar Heels. But it will be very interesting to see that. One of the few picks that I got right happened on the other side of the bracket. Both of them. I mean, obviously Gonzaga getting by Xavier. I mean, Gonzaga, I mean, no offense to them, but they had a fairly easy path to the Final Four outside of University of West Virginia and their incredible like press defense. But kudos to Gonzaga for finally getting over the hump and finally making it to the Final Four. I mean, for the longest time, they've been considered sort of this like mid-tier school. But I mean, they've always been able to pump out a strong basketball program year in, year out. And this is even the first time that they were ranked as the number one seed in the tournament. So the fact of the matter is that I think we should really start considering Gonzaga to be a true basketball powerhouse, and they finally have that validation of being a Final Four team. So that's real nice to see. And then on the other side, I was able to predict South Carolina beating Florida. And mostly just because I felt this South Carolina team was the team of destiny. And so it's going to be interesting to see whether or not they can upend Gonzaga as they try to sort of, if they can further cement the program as one of the top tier ones in the nation. We'll see. I mean, what are your predictions for the rest with the Final Four as well as the finals?
Yeah, so I kudos again to Oregon to dismantling the top Big 12 team in Kansas. But again, I all I did this year was watch Big 12 basketball, so my opinions on Kansas and Baylor and West Virginia and those top tier teams that they were beating up on some terrible teams on the bottom of the Big 12. So I wouldn't necessarily say Oregon's win is tainted, but I think you could think that it could have been possible. Obviously, you guys didn't pick it. I didn't pick this. I had Villanova winning the entire championship, and obviously that didn't pan out. So my entire Final Four was basically out by the third round. So I kind of checked out of college basketball at that point. Anyway, to summarize, I guess, is I wouldn't put too much chips in the basket for Oregon. They got an extremely tough matchup ahead against the North Carolina Tar Heels. And I just don't see them being able to get through. I think North Carolina is much, much, much better than a team like Kansas is. As far as the other side, South Carolina's stream stops. You got to look at Gonzaga. They've only lost one game this entire year, and that was against BYU. You could potentially call that a fluke. They only lost by 8 points. And that was, late February. So they've just gone off the deep end in their winning streaks since then. So I would point right to Gonzaga being the better team everywhere on paper, and the dream stops there for South Carolina. As far as winner, I'll probably go North Carolina. What about you?
Yeah, same here. Like I mentioned before, they were there in the finals last year and would have won it all had it not been for a last-second buzzer beater in arguably one of the best finals I have seen in a long time. That being said, North Carolina also has a lot to prove. This is very much the same team that made it to the finals last year, and they are very motivated to put away those demons and try to knock the things out. I do believe also that Gonzaga does go over South Carolina. I mean, as great a job as the South Carolina coach has done, especially considering that he's a former Kentucky coach that unfortunately kind of flamed out a bit there. He's been able to sort of to build up this South Carolina team and at a school that wasn't exactly known for its basketball prior to this season, and has really lifted this team up. I'm going to go with North Carolina over Gonzaga, and I hope to be a fairly close game. Maybe not as close as last year's finals, but I think it's going to be very entertaining.
Mm-hmm. So I guess we're picking the same then, North Carolina over Gonzaga then.
Yes, we are.
I guess great minds think alike, or great minds fall together. I don't know. All right. Do you want to move on to the NBA right now?
Sure, let's go ahead. Well, I guess we'll start off with the Houston Rockets. Had a bit of an up and down week. They had a win over OKC. Again, they had to overcome Westbrook having another just miracle. Not really a miracle performance at this point. It's just Westbrook being Westbrook and averaging a triple double every game. But I mean, obviously they got James Harden, who I mean, granted, he was average that game, but I mean, it's an average James Harden performance is still an amazing performance. But what really put them over the hump in that game was Lou Williams just going off after coming off the bench, getting 31 points, really proving why the Rockets traded for him in the first place, and showing how important he is to this team and how much he's added to them going forward. But then, unfortunately, they lost to Golden State Warriors. I mean, granted, I mean, it's always going to be the Golden State Warriors. And I mean, even though they're down Durant, they already have 3 other All-Stars on that team. But at the same time, like, I mean, if they wish to go to the finals, they have to start performing better against this team. And I said it before that I think this Houston Rockets team matches up fairly well with Golden State, in so much that they both have very similar strengths. Granted, I'd say Golden State has the better player with Kevin Durant, but like if you exclude Kevin Durant, and assuming if worse comes to worse and Kevin Durant can't even make it back for the playoffs, I mean, and I hope he comes back, but if it's just the original 3 of Draymond Green and Klay Thompson and Steph Curry versus what the Rockets have, I'd still say James Harden is the best of all those players. And they need better performances from people like Nene and Clint Capella, their interior players, and trying to exploit that huge weakness in the Golden State team. And they didn't really do themselves any favors. It's Portland, who's also actually on the tear themselves and have moved in to the 8th seed in the West after just completely just like dialing down and getting a complete revelation in Yusuf Nurkic from the Nuggets, who they had to unseat from the 8th seed to begin with, and who have their own crazy Serbian and Jokic, who's also been performing very well. But they can't lose to these teams like Portland. I mean, granted, they had a good second half, but it wasn't enough to overcome a terrible first half on their end. And so it's going to really come down to just James Harden, leader on this team, to just get everyone focused on the same page and focusing on that one goal, which is to win the NBA championship. And so it's going to be a huge test of his leadership coming down the stretch, and to see whether or not he can help get this team to rally around each other and rally together in order to make it to the finals.
All right, and as far as the Mavs go, this is disaster week for the Mavs. You can, I guess, look at it and say that they're mathematically out of the playoffs at this point. They have 3 losses so far, and they're currently playing Memphis, and they're losing badly, so that you can chalk that up as 4 this entire week. They lost to Toronto by 8, packaged with a very inconsistent offense. They moved Yogi Ferrell back to the bench after starting about a dozen games in a row, and he was struggling off the bench. Nerlens Noel, limited minutes, and then Wes Matthews just with a completely garbage game, just 0 for 8 on 3-pointers, and just not so good on the rest. Then the loss to Oklahoma City clinched the Mavs' first losing season since 1999. That's 18 years now. I barely even remember a losing Mavs team at this point. They actually played the game pretty well against Oklahoma City. There were 2 missed ref calls at the very end of the game that basically killed any momentum the Mavs had. One of them was a Russell Westbrook travel, and it was pretty obvious. He kind of hiccuped the ball on his chest and kind of pulled it back while his feet were still moving, and they didn't call it. Then he ended up getting a and one on that drive. Then at the very end, there was a inbounds that was off one of the Thunder players and with JJ Barea's hand. And it looked like in the instant replay that it actually was fingertipped off the Thunder, even though it looked like JJ Barea had actually pushed it more. But they didn't call it. They called it was JJ Barea's. And then it was Thunder ball, and then it was a 14-0 comeback to take the lead, and it was pretty much all Westbrook led. So aside from refs calls killing momentum, the Mavs just completely choked a 13-point lead away. And as far as the game the other day against New Orleans, basically was just a complete disaster. And then some of the other bench guys kind of got into it. Devin Harris was fined earlier today, $25,000 for aggressively pursuing an official and failing to leave the court after he had an ejection on that game. So it seems like this team is kind of getting pulled apart by the seams. It's kind of sad to see. This team who had for about a month and a half actually decided to work hard and work at it and try and vie for that eighth spot. And they were doing a pretty good job at it, staying actually above 500 since the All-Star break, even before then, and getting Nerlens Noel to gel so well, and obviously Yogi Mania. But everything's just kind of fallen apart in the last 3 weeks. Simmons, what have you seen in this Mavs team that just – is it just a matter of they're finally embracing the tank, or is it just something that's deeper than that?
I mean, I want to believe that it's them embracing the tank, since I've been on Team Tank ever since pretty much a month into the season, and after seeing just how bad this team was, and remembering how bad this team was last year and how they miraculously didn't get swept in the playoffs. That also being said, I'm a little bit troubled by how this team went from showing signs of life and just sort of seeming to at least try to work out like a winning formula, even if it's not for this year. But it looks like that motivation might be gone. I mean, it's hard to tell since, obviously I'm not in the locker room, so I can't tell you what's going down behind the scenes, and if try to knock it off and see if they can get a higher pick in this year's draft. That being said, I mean, you hope to at least get some good performances from people that you want to see there next year, specifically Harrison Barnes, Nerlens Noel. I mean, Seth Curry has really, really cooled off. I mean, I know we were talking about Yogi Mania sort of dying down, but I mean, Seth Curry went from someone that was scoring 20 points a game to being lucky to get double-digit points now, and it's been frustrating to see that. And I mean, Wes Matthews has just been. I mean, bless his heart, he's worked all his way up for what he has, but I mean, he's just not that good anymore. I mean, he had his moments, like when he was defending Westbrook, not this week, but the week right before Dirk hit 30,000 points. And I would say that right after Dirk hit 30,000, this team seems to have really pedal. And maybe that's the thing, is that they don't really have anything. They feel like they don't have much to fight for this season. And after that 30,000 points, that it sort of just let the air out of the balloon to some extent. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of agree. In that situation where I guess after Dirk's 30,000 points, there was nothing left to look forward to. They should have rallied around the fact that they were, I think, only a game or two outside of the 8th seed. And they had, I guess a homestand to figure out if they can do that. But I guess it didn't happen. And we'll have to see if next year, which should be Dirk's last year, if they can rally around that. And if not, then it will be another ugly year for the Dallas Mavericks. Okay, so let's move on to MLB. First, if you haven't checked out the American League and National League Preview Podcasts, go ahead and do that. The links will be in the description. If you're listening on the website right now, you can scroll down and see those podcasts. In those podcasts, me and both Nick and Nathan Simmons go discuss all 30 teams in Major League Baseball and their strengths and weaknesses and what we think they're going to do in the next season. Anyway, let's talk a little bit closer to home now with the Texas Rangers. A lot of stuff has happened in this last final weekend of spring training, and as they're going into exhibition games before the beginning of the year. So first noteworthy thing is that Darvish was slated to start opening day, which is on Monday, against Corey Kluber. This is actually Darvish's first time that he's been selected to start opening day in his 6th year with the Rangers. That's actually, if you think about it, actually, this is the 9th different pitcher that the Rangers have had to start opening day. Then Martin Perez scheduled to pitch the 2nd game and Hamels 3rd. And that's not basically a hierarchy thing. That's more of a pitching schedules situation where Hamels is actually playing one of the exhibition games beforehand and would need that 4 days before the 3rd game to get ready. And it's not indicative of any hierarchy. Secondly, one of the big extensions was signed over this week. Rougned Odor signed 6-year extension, $49.5 million, with a 7th-year option for $13.5 million or $3 million buyout. And to sweeten the deal, John Daniels put in 2 horses. So as a matter of signing Rougned Odor, Rangers now have their second baseman for the next 6 years. They've locked down second base and shortstop until 2022. And at least at this value, it's a pretty good deal. You're looking at a 30-plus home run hitter in Rougned Odor. You should expect something like that for quite a while, a power-hitting guy like him. Obviously, he's still young, so he can work on the other peripheral things, like staying patient at the plate or working on his defense. And even without that, the value of this contract isn't that bad. What do you think about this extension?
I mean, I love it. Like, even though we're basically seeing a lot of money, like, even though it's for a pretty long time, and it's only like buying out 3 years, 2 to 3 years of his post arbitration years. It's not for all that much, too much money for someone that has shown potential to be an all-star. Or borderline all-star, more specifically. It's just like like you said, you'd like to see him improve his peripherals, specifically, obviously, his walk rate. You don't want to see that from someone that you plan on having part of your core, no matter how many home runs he hits. And granted, I mean, like he's got great power production for someone that plays second base. I mean, someone that gets 30-plus home runs is nothing to sneeze at, especially from a second baseman. But for someone that delivers mostly just power, some decent contact and some decent speed, but not defense from that position. I mean, you would like to see him try to improve, but the thing is that he's very, very young. He's like 23, if I remember correctly. John Daniels has shown that he trusts him with this contract, and it's just going to be on him now to sort of prove it and to justify that contract. And so I think he can do it. What I love the most about Rookie's game is not necessarily just like the power and all that, and how it's sort of the way he plays, and he just plays with an edge and he plays with an intensity.
Yeah, I agree. He's a very passionate player. I do wish he doesn't get too passionate where it gets distracting. Obviously, he needs to kind of watch out what he does, especially in those rivalry games against Houston or the Angels or Toronto. But other than that, I do enjoy his passion, and I do enjoy the potential power that you can get off of him as a second baseman. So it'll be fun to see him roaming around. And another thing, too, that for $49.5 million over 6 years, it's a pretty tradable contract. 3-4 years down the line, if the Rangers turn sour, that's something they could potentially trade. All right. As far as the end of spring training went for the Rangers, you got to give the MVP to Delino Deshields. The complete highlight. We were talking about him at the very beginning, hopefully hanging on to an outfield bench spot. He might have played himself into a leadoff role, going plus 300 in his average, almost 450 in his OBP. He had 12 steals in entire spring training that led the team, and it might have even led the Cactus League. His running was incredible during spring training. His defense, noticed by the beat writers, has improved. So, I mean, Delino Deshields, you have to put him as the highlight of Rangers spring training. But you don't even have to scoff at some of the rest of the players. Ryan Rua and Jurickson Profar had great spring training. So the key will be how do you get all three of those guys playing time. It might be something like Profar is now going to have to play more infield, and Rua is going to have to play a little bit more infield, because you want to see if Deshields can actually return to his 2015 form. And it looks like in spring training he's actually done that and more. As far as final bench spots and roster cuts and things like that, some notable names. James Loney did get released. Jared Hoying and Eddie Gamboa got optioned back to AAA Round Rock. Anthony Bass learned he did not make the team, and he'll likely to also end up at AAA. Dylan G actually opted out of his contract, but worked out a restructure with the Rangers where he's added to the 40-man, but he would start in AAA. It's assumed that he would, if Andrew Couch is not ready in time for the time that the Rangers need that fifth spotter, that Dylan G would come in. The actual surprise is that Keone Kela was optioned to AAA, and the reason that John Daniels gave was an undisclosed incident in the clubhouse. We don't know what specifically it is, but if it had to do something with altering the clubhouse chemistry, it's more of a Kela needs to. It's more of a demotion, I would say, and Kela needs to kind of like learn to be humble or understand. In his time as AAA, I don't necessarily have a big problem with that. I think the Rangers bullpen was stacked with righties anyway. So
I'll like to add in here just quickly, but Kela's also we talk about Rugi's intensity, but Kela's also kind of gotten a reputation of being a bit of a hothead. He's still pretty new to this whole being an MLB player thing. So hopefully he matures and fixes the problems that he has, because I know he kind of struggled when he came back towards the end of last year, but when he's on, he's got arguably the fastest fastball in that bullpen, and so hopefully we can get him back soon.
Yeah, definitely. I think like I said, the Rangers will be okay with the amount of righties that they currently have there. Sam Dyson, Matt Bush, Jeremy Jeffress, among others. As far as injuries go, Tanner Shepard has an abdominal strain. He's probably going to end up on the DL. Same with Hanser Alberto with the shoulder injury. Any chances he had of that bench spot withered away with both his terrible spring training and the shoulder injury. Gomez also had a similar shoulder injury, but was well enough to play in the exhibition games. Beltre has a sore right calf and was actually kind of slow at the end of spring training in getting it to heal. We'll see if he plays in one of the exhibition games this weekend. He'll be good to go for opening day, but if not, he might end up on the DL. So now you're looking at potential players that could be affected by these injuries, namely Joey Gallo, potentially playing third base instead of Adrian Beltre. Dario Alvarez may be getting that final bench spot because Shepard is hurt. And then Drew Robinson potentially getting the final bench spot due to Hanser Alberto's injury. Those guys are still in limbo. So we'll see over the weekend what happens and who plays on Monday.
Definitely, yeah. No, it's a lot of intrigue. Like when you first think that we've already solved the left field spot, more spots seem to maybe shaking up a bit too.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see if what the Rangers will do coming into this first week of games. That'll be 3 against Cleveland to start, and then 3 against Oakland. So it'll be to see how well the Rangers can perform against the reigning AL champions starting on Monday. All right, let's move on to the Astros. Astros had a lot less news this week than the Rangers did. One of the transactions that were made was that they traded minor league catcher Tyler Heinemann to Milwaukee for a player to be named later or cash. As Quan's commentary, it's not a huge deal that Heinemann was traded. He's essentially stuck behind 2 players blocked in AAA. He's an aging prospect, you would say, even older than someone like Drew Robinson. So it's not that big of a deal that he got traded. The Astros kind of lined up their rotation with out Colin McHugh, who's going to be out for a little bit, similar to Andrew Kashner. Dallas Keuchel will be starting first game. McCullers the second, and Charlie Morton the third. They finally decided upon Musgrove as the 4th starter and Mike Fiers as the 5th. That battle for the 5th spot ended up as both pitchers winning due to the McHugh injury. And then as far as schedule next week goes, the Astros have Seattle for 4 games and then Kansas City for 3 games. A notable thing about Seattle, one of their players, Drew Smiley, just got hurt, and he's going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks. And that cripples that already thin Seattle rotation behind Felix Hernandez. So I already have to give advantage to the Astros there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I don't have too much to add to this. That's a pretty good summation.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see for the Astros. Expect no one to really pull out of the division for quite a while, and then maybe that first week of May when the Astros play the Rangers, we'll see we'll really see how well these teams play against each other and if that rivalry heat up or not. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah. No. Let's move on to the NFL now, though. So first off, some Cowboys news. Jason Witten signs a 4-year extension, pretty much guaranteeing that he's going to be a Cowboy for life, unless he gets traded, which I can't imagine happening. But basically what this deal does is that instead of like actually adding more money to the cap, it actually reduces it by quite a lot. And this was definitely a move by the Cowboys in order to free up some cap space for the upcoming years, in order to help bring in more players, specifically on the defensive side. I mean, I know Jerry Jones specifically said that he wanted a war daddy on the defensive side of the ball, whatever that means. But basically, I assume that it's someone that they've been missing ever since the peak performance of DeMarcus Ware back in the day. But adding someone else who is on the same caliber of Sean Lee, but maybe not someone that gets as injured as he does. But that being said, obviously kudos to Jason Witten for being the stand-up guy that he is, helping free up some space for the cap, but also showing his, I guess, loyalty to the Cowboys, even though that, even after seeing sort of like his best friend, Tony Romo, the business, basically kind of the business side of football, which is that sometimes they decide to move on from you. But that being said, while I wouldn't say he's not necessarily at the peak of his career in terms of performance as a tight end, he's still he's still way above average, even though he's almost 40 at this point. And so it's nice. It's nice to see that they've locked it down, and this gives them more time to at least look for a backup option at some point. I mean, granted, this if they wanted to find a backup this year, then they could have found someone in the draft, considering how deep this draft is at the position of tight end. But this gives them more time, and it gives them at least a very strong locker room presence, the locker room leadership that Jason Witten always brought. So that should be nice. But yeah, unfortunately, that wasn't the only news this week. And opposite of showing a ton of loyalty, to the very opposite of that is what the Raiders did, or specifically what the owners did in allowing the Raiders to move from Oakland to Las Vegas. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so this is an incredible story that happened this week. The Vegas Raiders, as they're probably going to be called now, going to be opening up shop in 2019 within the city, but their stadium won't be ready till 2020, and whether that's 3 years from now. You're looking at the Raiders staying in Oakland for the time being. Like, talk about an awkward situation that for a fact for the next 2 years, like, nothing you will do will keep your team in that city. And that's just the way the vote went. It was 31-1. The only team that dissented was the Miami Dolphins. That's just an incredible margin that this is happening. And I also understand it on Oakland's side that if they've been looking for a different place to have a stadium for so long, and none of the plans that the city worked out really made sense for the team. And if it's a matter of publicly financing a stadium, the Oakland mayor didn't want to have to do something like that. There are obviously other teams and other sports that do want to decide to do that, and there are positives and negatives on each side. Depending on, I guess, political spectrum, you can make arguments either way. But at least in this case, the owners thought that the city was a lost cause, and they decided to seek elsewhere. I actually don't have a problem with them relocating, aside from the fact that they still have 2 years in Oakland, and it's just a really bad situation there.
Yeah, that I agree with you in terms of just like, I mean, again, like this was like, in all fairness, I mean, Oakland Raiders for the past few years, they have been pretty much bottom of the league in terms of attendance. But I mean, a lot of that had to do with just like the poor product they were putting on the field, which was just bad team after bad team. Like, I mean, the peak performances that they were having were 8-8 seasons under Tom Cable, and then after that they decided to fire him still. But it finally seemed like this they had this team turn around with a very bright future, with Khalil Mack anchoring that defense, and then you had obviously the Carr at quarterback with Crabtree and Amari Cooper as your as arguably the best 1-2 punch at wide receiver in all the league. But unfortunately, the minute they turn it around, they've decided to pack up and move out. And that's a huge blow to that city, because I mean, while I've never necessarily visited Oakland, I do know a few people that are from the Oakland area who were huge Raiders fans, but I don't know what's going to happen to them. I mean, like, at the end of the day, it's just only sports, and so, like, I mean, obviously this isn't gonna really kill them, but I mean, you see the stories of how when I was on Reddit, NFL Reddit, when they were announcing the San Diego Chargers moving to Los Angeles, and how basically for one person, for one commenter, and how basically the Chargers were his like one last connection to his father, who passed away when he was like 10 or something like that. And he would always have this like jersey of the San Diego Chargers that his father gave him. And I mean, while like at least Los Angeles is somewhat closer to San Diego than Las Vegas is to Oakland, I mean, that's still kind of a blow to it, and the emotional attachments that people have to those teams, and the meaning, the sentimental meaning that they have. But it's a business, so I that you got to figure out a way to balance those two sometimes opposing forces.
Yeah, definitely. Also note that the Warriors are actually going to be moving to San Francisco soon too, leaving the A's as the only team left in Oakland. And I know the mayor is going to be working with that team to find a new stadium and finally move out of Oco. So at least the city will still have the Oakland Athletics, I guess. And it also brings up an interesting conversation about the future of the city of Las Vegas itself. You now have an NFL team, and you're going to get an expansion hockey team next year in the Vegas Golden Knights. Now you're looking at a prime destination for sports fans to come in on weekends and go watch their team and go spend money and do all this kind of stuff. I think, or if I were a fan of these teams, I would definitely want to plan my vacations around this, and I think their away attendance at these games will be astounding, probably the highest in the respective leagues, in my opinion.
For sure, yeah. No, I mean, like, the bigger question to me is whether or not they can build that like home group fan base themselves. I mean, especially since not only are you going to get a lot of like interest from like outside fans who want to finally visit Vegas or something like that, but also use that same weekend to go see their favorite team. And I mean, not only are these going to be outside fans, but these are going to be like fans that want to have a fun weekend or something like that. And so they might end up. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can build like a grassroots fan base in the Vegas area. I mean, I know it's been growing a lot since the mid 2000s, in spite of the how hard hit it was by the market crash in 2008. But I mean, it's going to be interesting to see if they can organically how they're going to organically build that hometown fan base.
Yeah, I think the hockey team will probably be easier, at least in the sense that there aren't any transplants that are coming with it. So that'll feel, I guess, more grassroots is what you would say. At least with the Raiders, you'll find more outside season ticket holders in that sense.
Yeah, and on top of that too, like the Knights will always have that distinction of being like the first like true major sports team to call Las Vegas home. I mean, obviously not counting the XFL Las Vegas Outlaws, but definitely
no one ever counts the XFL.
Exactly,
man.
yeah. But but yeah, the Knights will always have that sort of sentiment with them. So yeah, it's gonna be. I'd say it's gonna be interesting to see how the Raiders can help. I mean, the NFL is still incredibly popular. So I mean, and I'm pretty sure there's quite a few football fans in Las Vegas. So we'll see how that goes. Definitely.
All right, let's move on to a new sport topic. We are going to be talking about golf right now. So let's go ahead and the Shell Houston Open is currently going on right now. A bunch of the big names are competing in this week's tournament before the Masters kicks off next week. Sung Hoon Kang is currently in the lead He's winning by 6 strokes. He actually set the 36-hole record in the Houston Open. So congrats to him in that situation. Player Jordan Spieth actually missed the cut within the Houston Open, so he is going to get 2 less playing days before he heads off to Augusta. I'm going to recap. The tournament last week was in Austin, actually, the Dell Match Play, where the golfers were put into groups and basically gone head-to-head in match play, and then via playoff bracket you would determine the winner. Dustin Johnson got through his early pretty easily in the first rounds. Rory McIlroy and Jordan Spieth were eliminated in their first rounds after winning one, losing one, and tying one within their opening group. Other notable players, Jason Day, he withdrew early in the first round due to finding out that his mom had lung cancer and had to go attend her surgery the Friday of the week. So he withdrew pretty early. Sad, but that's absolutely the right call there. As far as the finals goes, Dustin Johnson ended up easily dominating and beat John Ram, and he won one up. So that is now Dustin Johnson's second win in the last month and third in the last 2 months of the PGA Tour. So now you're looking at the Masters, which is next weekend, famed Augusta National. So who do you think has the advantage going into the Masters this year?
Tough to say. I mean, usually, like I would go with Spieth, but I mean, Spieth has really been struggling like this quite past few months. Even. I mean, it's tough to figure out what specifically is going on with him. Especially since I don't usually watch these like smaller tournaments. Outside of the majors, but he's kind of struggled. Same with Rory McIlroy. I mean, and those are like the 2 big names that you have. But I mean, you feel for Jason Day. I mean, I definitely saw the clip of him sort of explaining why he was going. He was just tearing up and just crying. And it really drove home like just how emotionally like out of it he was. And I don't know if he can like really recover from like someone that close to you going through something so fatal. Right, so it's something that might be very critical. Obviously, thoughts and prayers to him and his family. But if I had to guess, it'd probably be Dustin Johnson. I mean, he's had a decent track record recently. Dustin Johnson, coming off a U.S. Open win from last year, and obviously coming off the win this past month down in Austin, winning a pair of boots also. But he's shown some steadiness that Rory and Spieth haven't shown. And so if I had to go with anyone, I would go with Dustin Johnson. I would go with Johnson.
Yeah, he seems to be the people's favorites at this point. Like I said before, he has 3 wins in the last 2 months. He's just been a very solid player basically since his U.S. Open win last year. I also wouldn't count out some of these other players. Don't count out Jason Day, who could take this tragedy in his family and take that to heart and play out of his mind come next weekend. Also look at Danny Willett, who's looking to repeat winning the Masters as he did last year. Or look at Jordan Spieth, who he won the Pebble Beach Pro-Am about 5 or 6 weeks ago and hasn't really been that good since. Look for him to make a major comeback. He always plays the Masters pretty well. He's played it 3 times and hasn't finished any worse than second. Obviously, last year he blew an enormous lead to get to second. But I think he'll get over that hump once he hits, I think it was the 14th hole. Once he hits that 14th hole and plays it normally, I think he'll get over it. So look for him at the top of the leaderboard. Also look at Hideki Matsuyama, who's had a bunch of top 10 finishes this PGA year so far, and has actually won almost as much as Dustin Johnson has. So look for him as a dark horse too. As always, Rory and Phil and Bubba Watson, former winners of the Masters, they should get their shot too. So that should be a fun tournament next week.
So let's move on now to UT basketball. We had a busy week, filled with rumors and innuendo, but let's focus on what's been confirmed. And so, first we had not necessarily this week, but the week prior, Jarret Allen declared for the draft. I mean, granted, he hasn't found an agent yet, so there's still a possibility for him to return, especially if he works out for teams but doesn't get a draft position that he thinks that he could get the next year. But it's 50-50 with him, I think, whether or not he returns or not, since like he came into this year as a 5-star recruit and he did nothing but improve this year. I mean, granted, obviously it would have also been nice if he could have helped lead this team to a winning season, but I mean, the NCAA level is more than just one player, and he couldn't do it all on his own. But it wasn't only him that declared, but also Andrew Jones. And I think it's far more likely that Andrew Jones returns than necessarily goes and gets drafted into the NBA. Especially since it would really depend on whether or not an NBA team kind of like falls in love with him in a sense. And promises to take him in the lottery, because I think Andrew Jones to me has lottery potential if he stays an extra year and improves at the rate that he did this past year, which he did. Oh man, did he definitely improved this year. But you'd like to see both return, and if maybe they can, on top of adding Matt Coleman, maybe add and maybe put him at the 4, put Jarret at the 5, and then have a strong bench. At least you'd like to see that, but not going to hold my breath either way. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree in that sense. I still don't think Jarret Allen is NBA ready at this point. You've noticed a slight improvement in his game. In my opinion, when Tevin Mack got suspended, all the weight in the world was put on Jarret Allen's shoulders to carry this team, and I don't think he accomplished what he wanted to set out for. He, eventually was the highest scorer on that team, and like you said before, you can't carry an entire NCAA team on one person's shoulders. Obviously, if you're in the NBA and you're LeBron James, you can do that, but this isn't the NBA. I just don't think Jarret Allen is ready. He had way too much trouble with ball handling. His turnovers were insane at the beginning of the year. They got slightly better, but it's still not at a clip that you'd feel comfortable with. And I think he can work on that with Shaka. As far as Andrew Jones goes, I don't think any facet of his game was good enough to be a lottery pick, and he would need a lot more seasoning with this Texas team if he wants to actually, if he has aspirations for the draft. That being said, I would happily welcome both returning to the team next year. If you want to say that this is rock bottom, that this season was rock bottom, then things can't get any worse with a better season Jarret Allen and a better season Andrew Jones. So yeah, Jarret Allen and Andrew Jones would be very helpful to the team next year. Hopefully Shock will have a much better season than he did last year, and really quell those rumors that maybe 3 years is the limit for some of these new coach hires for the University of Texas. Like, do you think Shaka will have a significantly better year next year?
He better, yeah. No, I mean he's clearly a good coach to me. I mean, like, you look at what he did with VCU. I mean, like, yeah, he only reached the Final Four one time, but I mean that was at VCU, and they don't have near half the resources that Texas has. And I mean, granted, I mean he had a far more talented cast this year than he ever had at VCU, and he did so little with it, but I will say this, and like the program was due for a season like this, considering like how much they've struggled in recent years and just how young this team was. And I think that going forward, he needs to be more aware of is that like he needs more experience on his teams, as well as making sure that he has an actual point guard going forward, or someone that he knows that he can rely on to be a point guard. If Shaka fails here, then I mean, like he was the hottest coaching prospect coming out, especially after Brad Stevens took the Celtics job. And the fact that he kind of fails here is, I don't know if that's indicative of just like Texas in general, or if that's indicative of Shaka. Do you agree?
Yeah, I guess I can agree. I think having a point guard, an actual point guard, will do wonders for this team. having someone to take charge and leading the ball, and so we don't have to rely as much about this transition offense that we were good at, and play better on normal. So yeah, we'll need a full year of that to really determine if Shaka is succeeding at Texas or not. All right, that was a lot of sports we covered, so let's get into some shout-outs now. An actual successful UT sports program is men's swimming and diving. They just won their 3rd national title in a row, and that is their 13th overall. So shout out to them for bringing home some trophies. Also shout out to Donta Foreman at Texas Pro Day. Had some great numbers after fracturing his foot earlier at the NFL Combine. Was able to overcome that and run a 4:45.40. He actually ran 2 of those in a row. So shout out to him.
Also shout out to Tyrone Swoopes, who's making the transition from quarterback to tight end. Apparently there were good reviews of him from the pro day, and saying that he had some progress there, which is nice to see. And there was also David Ash, who's trying to make his comeback. Shout out to those two to both Tyrone Swoopes for trying to make the transition from quarterback to tight end, and to David Ash, who's trying to make his comeback. I know it was tough for him to say no, but no, it'd be nice to see. All right. And so shout out to a lot of wrestlers I'm going to shout out because this weekend is Wrestlemania weekend. So Wrestlemania is going to be taking place in Orlando this Sunday. But prior to that, tonight, I'd like to shout out to Kurt Angle. It's DDP, Dallas Diamond Page, as well as Beth Phoenix, the Rock and Roll Express, as well as Teddy Long and Eric LeGrand, who's getting the Warrior Award for trying to rehab his. He's right now. He's a former Nebraska football player that became a quadriplegic and is working his way back from that. But shout out to all those people. They're going into the Hall of Fame tonight as we speak. Kurt Angle, long overdue. Dallas Diamond Page, who is most famous for his work in WCW, but also on top of that, he's has this thing called DDP Yoga, which he's been able to use to help rehabilitate wrestlers, most famously Jake the Snake Roberts and Scott Hall, who were both pretty much on the precipice of death due to substance abuse problems, but through DDP Yoga. And this is according to them themselves. Like, if it weren't for DDP Yoga, they'd both be dead right now. But yeah, so shout out to those people. Almost forgot to mention Rick Rude also is being added in posthumously. Long overdue. Arguably one of the greatest heels back in the 80s, late 90s, and added to the late night wars when he ended up showing up on both WWE Raw and WCW Nitro on the same night, which was crazy back in the day. Congrats to him and everyone for making it in. And then tomorrow night is going to be NXT TakeOver Orlando. And main event's going to be Shinsuke Nakamura versus Bobby Roode. And then you got Ember Moon, who's a Dallas native. She grew up in Garland. She'll be taking on Asuka, who is trying to upend Goldberg's winning streak. Speaking of which, Goldberg is going to be trying to defend his Universal title at WrestleMania. And what a lot of people at first were thinking was going to be the main event, but it looks like the main event, as of right now, the rumor is that the main event will be Roman Reigns versus Undertaker. If that's the case, then Roman Reigns is going to be main eventing his 3rd WrestleMania in a row. Honestly, I think that might be 2 WrestleManias more than he necessarily should have at this point. I think he deserves this to main event this WrestleMania just because he's finally found his groove as a performer and has really settled into a nice role. And quite frankly, I think he does deserve to be at the top of the card. But I mean, like he for all intents and purposes, he's pretty much a bad guy. And I mean, the sooner that WWE commits to that and sort of like gets behind it to some extent, I mean, like they're booking him pretty well for all intents and purposes. They're booking him as this badass, and he's really filled that role in well. But it's going to be interesting to see the reactions, especially if he beats The Undertaker in what might be his final WrestleMania. So we'll see what happens. So that's pretty much about it. And then shout out to my parents who are right now at the American Airlines Center cheering on the UConn women's basketball team as they try to win the women's Final Four in basketball this year, as they've done many years recently. It's as long as I can remember, the UConn women's basketball team has been winning national championships. So we'll see.
Yeah, if only Texas had beat them last year or the year before, maybe more people would be excited about the national women's championship.
For sure, yeah. Well, I mean, at least this year they didn't lose to UConn.
Yeah, that's true, but
yeah. But anyway, that's about it. That wraps everything up for this week on Two Nates on Sports. Remember to like us on Facebook as well as subscribe to our YouTube pages, and also follow us on Stitcher and iTunes and Google Play. Wraps it up with us. Hope you all have a great week.